Heat check. Basketball, basketball, college. Basketball, basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa.
Welcome in to another episode of the Heat Check Hangout, your number one source for all things basketball, college. I'm your host, Brian Ralph, joined by Connor Hope today as we continue our conference preview series with the SEC. The SEC has had a basketball resurgence over the last 5 to 10 years, really. Has become one of the more competitive leagues in the country, particularly at the top. It's more than just Kentucky now, as it was Kentucky for forever. Now it's kind of Alabama's conference, the way that they've been rolling. But I do want to start, Connor, with Kentucky, because while they may not be the team to beat in the SEC, we'll get into that conversation a little bit later. They are, I think, the biggest lightning rod, as Kentucky and John Calipari tend to be. Brought in the nation's top recruiting class. There's a lot of really good freshmen on this roster, but they are freshmen. And it's also been a while since Kentucky has had a long run in the NCAA tournament. There is some rumblings and grumblings among Big Blue Nation about John Calipari's future with Kentucky, even though he has a lifetime contract. I think I am higher than the general consensus on this Kentucky team because I like the potential of what their guards can be and how they, at least on paper, fit into this system. But I fully acknowledge that I think this team has an incredibly wide variance of outcomes for the season.
Yeah, I think when I'm looking at Kentucky, two things that I noticed right away. First off, say what you want about Antonio Reeves and Trey Mitchell. And maybe we don't know what they are necessarily. I mean, Reeves, we kind of know what he is as a leader because he's been with Kentucky, but we don't really know what they're going to be like as the two elder statesmen on this roster, right? It's those two. They have a couple of sophomores that are probably going to be buried deeper in the rotation, and then all freshmen. One thing I will say, or the second thing I will say, is that their Achilles heel, or their biggest question mark heading into seasons, probably, most of 90% of the last decade has been 3-point shooting.
Yes.
And Reeves, excellent 3-point shooter. Trey Mitchell, for a 4-man, really good 3-point shooter. So they're experienced players who we know what we're going to get from them, at least from in a sense of production on the floor, kind of answer that question for me. For me, the two biggest questions you face is Aaron Bradshaw obviously comes in with a lot of pedigree at the 5. And there are a lot of, maybe not a lot, but there are a couple of very physical bigs in this SEC. How does he hold up to what are essentially men in the SEC? And he has the highest ceiling probably of all of them. But again, what we've seen is bigs sometimes have a tough time adjusting from playing high schoolers and AAU to playing 22-year-olds in college basketball. And I have that question. And then DJ Wagner, I said on the ACC podcast, I think I said a couple of months ago, I'd rather have Beekman than DJ Wagner as a point guard because I know what I'm going to get out of Beekman. And I think that still applies. Like, DJ Wagner is the X factor for this team. If he can come in and be the facilitator, help make the offense operate at its peak, then this Kentucky team could easily find itself in the top 5, top 10 for most of the season. But if he struggles, I don't necessarily know if there's another player on this roster. Maybe Dillingham can step in, maybe Shepherd, but I don't think there's another player on this roster that you're looking at that has that same ceiling when it comes to being a starting point guard in the SEC.
If they can find a way for Wagner and Dillingham to play together and be effective defensively playing together, you're looking at a team that can make a Final Four. Because if you're able to have two dynamic players like that who can both play make for others and create their own shots off the bounce, play effectively and efficiently together, that's something that very few teams in the country have. And I don't think anybody else would have if Wagner and Dillingham are playing at their peak. Nobody else would have that at that level. But again, that's a question because they're freshmen and we have not seen that typical, what we think of the John Calipari one and done guard, right? The names that we bring up are now names that played in college a decade or more ago early. Like there's been a stretch here since about Jamal Murray and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to a lesser extent, who has blossomed into a star in the NBA that no one really thought he would be in college, didn't play that way. Those are the last like two guys that immediately come to mind that were real difference makers with obvious NBA futures in the backcourt or potential NBA stardom, which Calipari went through that run when he first got to Kentucky, highlighted by John Wall, where they were just churning out elite NBA guard after elite NBA guard. It's been a little bit now. Wagner and Dillingham, I think, with their athleticism, playmaking off the bounce, just natural scoring ability, fit that mold more than a lot of the guys they've had in recent years. And the upside is there. But the fit is a little bit awkward given the size. They are both relatively undersized combo guards, would be fine for a point guard, and Wagner certainly fits more of the point guard mold. But I would classify both as more combo guards. With the injuries to the front line, there are some questions about the bigs, which is why I think Trey Mitchell is an important part. We just have to see this group, I think, in a game and the first month of the season, feel each other out and establish a pecking order, figure out what works, what does with certain lineups, because as much talent as they have a ton of unknowns, and that's not new for John Calipari or Kentucky, but it's still a bunch of unknowns.
Yeah, it is. And the front court's the big. I mean, I just looked. There are nine of the SEC teams will start either a senior or a fifth year at center. 9 out of 14 in the SEC. And then that doesn't include Janai Broom for Auburn, who's listed as a junior, or Henlogton for Florida, who's a sophomore. So you're really looking at 11 like bigs that we trust as like they have the experience, we've seen what they're able to do, or they're just older. And that's really where I think November, December is going to go a long way for this Kentucky team, because if we see it from Bradshaw in those first 2 months and he can get into SEC play with some pretty good games behind him, games against some other experienced bigs, then we're talking, I mean, because he has to go up against, and not to bring Gonzaga into everything, but he has to go up against guys like EK and Anton Watson really early in this, or no, that's later in the season. That's like in the middle of SEC play.
Yep. One of those random games.
One of those random games. But no, I just think it's going to be very telling in the first 2 months for Kentucky if they're going to be a team that can compete for a title in the SEC, or a team that we're worried about not necessarily missing the tournament, because they have the talent to make the tournament. They would have to fall really flat for them not to. But if they're a contender for the SEC title, or one of those teams that we're expecting to finish, third or fourth, fifth in the conference.
Before we move on, I do want to point out that Calipari was very brash this offseason, more than we've seen in the past. Not from a like confrontational or grouchy standpoint, but like here's our whole trip to Drake's house, and really showing off like all the cool Kentucky stuff. And there is part of that that makes me think that he's trying to do it for recruiting and kind of hold on to some of that mystique he had that Kentucky fans feel like he's lost the last couple of years. But he also has done that in the past when he knows his teams are really good, and he feels comfortable with being loud that way. So I'm interested to see how all of that goes. But as we mentioned,
just to cut in, so two players that Bradshaw will have to go up against, and I'm not looking at the are they in an MTE this year? I don't even know if they are. But third game of the season, Hunter Dickinson. And if he's not back for that, December 16th, Armando Bacot.
That'll be the big test. That'll be the big test. That game.
So yeah. So I'm high. I think I have them third in the conference, fourth in the conference. Just because there are some other teams that I trust a little bit more. But
Well, let's talk about those. Who are those teams you have ahead of them, and why?
I still have Alabama pretty high. I I trust the system that Alabama has
Okay.
to be a system that will continue to be good. Yeah, I have Alabama first. I have Arkansas second, Tennessee third, and then Kentucky fourth is the way I have the SEC.
I think those are the teams you put in that mix, that top tier, and you can throw Texas A&M in there too, based on what they have returning. But like any of those 5 teams, I think could win the SEC, and nobody is overly surprised.
Right. So Alabama, their backcourt is borderline elite. I think I would say, like, they don't have the top end guys, but Mark Sears was pretty good for them last year. Aaron Estrada was really good, really efficient last year. You're gonna have Latrell Wrightsell off the bench, who didn't win the Big West tournament, but damn near won it by himself last year. And then Rylan Griffin also playing the 3 spot. Like, that's a backcourt that I can trust even in late February into March to at least have set a floor that puts it higher than most other teams in the SEC. Grant Nelson, I like coming in. I think he could be pretty good. We'll see how he adjusts to the size and strength and caliber of the SEC. The biggest question mark for me for them is, do you play Grant Nelson at the 5 and go with someone smaller, maybe one of the freshmen at the 4, or do you play Nick Pringle at the 5, Grant Nelson at the 4, and then you're kind of hamstringing yourself from a floor stretching capacity at that 4 spot, because I don't think either of those guys are really gonna stretch the floor. But they provide a lot of defense for you, and a lot of size and strength that I think might be better. But that backcourt, if you have Sears, Estrada, and Wrightsell rotating in at the 1 and 2, like, you don't really need, in my opinion, that floor stretching 4 to reach your ceiling.
Yeah, like that's a very solid backcourt, obviously, right? And it's you're going to get consistent high level play. The difference between this group and last year in the backcourt for me is I don't know if any of those guys can be like the guy necessarily, right? And Brandon Miller was that last year, and Javon Quinterly had shown the ability to be that throughout his career. But these are guys who I think are really high level, like secondary options. Sears proved he could be the guy. Sears and Estrada, and well, all of them proved they could be that guy at lower levels. But I don't know if any of them can be that guy at this level. The one who I think can be, or has the best chance to be, in Alabama seems to be putting him out in a way that he presenting him as this guy for them is Grant Nelson. If he can be that guy, they can win the league again. They can make the Final Four, do all the things that we have come to expect Alabama to do under Nate Oates. But if he doesn't, like, this is a team then of, I think, a bunch of very good players without a true leader or true, like, top end player. And that limits your ceiling. You're still going to get a very, very good season, certainly. Be a top seed in the SEC, go to the NCAA tournament, be a decent seed, make a run. But Alabama's kind of past the point of that being a good season for them, right? Yeah. Still a good season, honestly, but Alabama fans are now at the point where they want that Final Four berth. They want SEC championships. They want national championship. If they're going to do those things, I think you need Nelson or one of those guards to become like a first-team All-SEC caliber player, a no doubt first-team SEC caliber player. And Nelson probably has the best chance to do that. But again, there are questions about his ability to do so, and I don't know if any of the guards will.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to get a lot out of Nelson. I also think that Rylan Griffin's going to have to effectively step into a bigger role.
Yeah.
Was not efficient last year, played 15 minutes a game, but he's your wing, because you look at the rest of the roster. Wrightsell and Estrada, I don't think are big enough to play the three in the SEC adequately enough to win
Right.
a championship. Their top freshmen are both bigs. And I think you have to like look down further in their rotation to find another true wing
Mhm.
that's going to spell Griffin. So if Griffin doesn't work out, I mean, Alabama's still going to be top 5 in the SEC good, I think, but I think he's really the guy who has to perform at his peak to unlock that ceiling for Alabama. Because if Pringle doesn't work out, you can throw in one of the freshmen. Maybe they work out better. If Sears or Estrada have to, well, Sears won't come off, but if Estrada has to come off the bench and Wrightsell can start, like that's something you're looking at. But Rylan Griffin really is that linchpin that the guards aren't quite big enough to play the three. There's not really a big on the roster that can move down to the three.
Mhm.
So Griffin's kind of on his island, and that would concern me more than anything as an Alabama
Yeah.
fan. But I trust the system of threes and layups to do its thing.
Speaking of trust and systems and guards, let's move to Arkansas, because all they do is make second weekends under Eric Musselman. But he has really, really leaned into the whole guard and perimeter play thing this offseason. It feels like they took every guard in the transfer portal, ended up at Arkansas somehow. But this is a team that returns key pieces from last year. Has got 5 guys that average double figures at their either at Arkansas or at their previous stops last season, led by L. Ellis coming over from Louisville. But Devontae Davis is back. Tremont Marks coming in from Houston. Like this is a team that has a lot of talent, has one of the more proven and consistent coaches in the country. If things fit better on paper or appeared to fit better on paper, I think we're talking about Arkansas as a top 5 team in the country. But instead, I think there is some question about how this all actually looks on the court.
Yeah, I like this roster better than last year, because I think one thing we've seen from Eric Musselman is that, and it's not necessarily the system, I think it's just the way he coaches, is that he does a lot with those transfers who come in looking to prove something. And that's what he has on the roster. He's got some experienced winners. He's got some players like L. Ellis, who has not seen winning at the college level. And so you just talk about 5 that average double digits, and that doesn't include Mekhi Mitchell, who's a 5th-year guy who was really efficient for them last year, just didn't have the minutes to put up. I mean, he scored 7 points in 20 minutes a game on like 65 from the field. And Jeremiah Davenport from Cincinnati, who's also a grad transfer, he was at 9.1. So there's the 5 double-digit scores, and then 2, a wing and a big that were also pretty good, maybe in fewer minutes than the rest of the guys. So this is a team that has 2 freshmen that are probably buried a little bit deeper in the rotation. One of the best defensive guards in the country in Devo Davis, who I think he sets the tone for them. Khalif Battle comes in, and I really like him. And, he's not an elite shooter, but between him and Devo Davis, like that's 2 35% shooters, which is something that Arkansas really hasn't had in their backcourt.
Right.
They've had streaky, low efficiency, high volume shooters. And now outside of Mark, every player in the projected starting 5, at least according to the Almanac, shoots at 35% or better from 3. We can ignore the volume from Mekhi Mitchell for that statement to work. But
1 for 1.
1 for 1 is still 100%. But yeah, this is a team I think is going to compete on the boards. It's pretty balanced. Everyone on this team, you talk about like the points. Every single player through the first 7 on this team averaged at least 1 assist per game last year, whether it would be for Arkansas or somewhere else. Ball movement's going to be pretty good. 5 of them averaged 1 steal a game. Again, Davenport and Mekhi Mitchell are at 0.8 and 0.9 respectively. So like their defense, like you look down what these guys did, and it's like balanced offense and defense. Some of them can shoot. All of them are relatively efficient at what they do. They're coming in. You've got senior grad transfer, junior, redshirt sophomore, 5th year, grad transfer, 5th year. Those are the top 8 players in the rotation according to the Almanac. Like this is a team. If I wasn't so enamored with the ceiling in the backcourt of Alabama, like Arkansas is right there. And I think we're going to see what we see with them all the time, which is November and December. It's going to look a little bit rough. January, when they get into SEC play, they're going to have growing pains adjusting to the caliber of competition every night. February, they're going to lose like 1 game.
Yeah,
and
they'll be a force in February and March because that's just the way Ark Musselman teams go. And I do think this team is primed to follow that path because while there is a lot of they do everything well, there are players who do everything well, and they should be strong in just about every category. There are some redundant skill sets, right? And so it's just kind of figuring out your rotation of how you use them, how to play off of each other, which is natural for any team with this many newcomers that are going to play a major role in the rotation. But you add some of those redundancies, it's going to take a little bit longer. To me, I don't buy like the Texas A&M hype of them potentially winning the SEC or competing, with the teams at the top in the race at the end of February, because to me they are a less talented version of that Arkansas team. Right, Arkansas has the redundant skill sets, but they do everything well, and you trust Musselman to figure it out. And they have more talent than Texas A&M, who is the same kind of deal. Yes, Wade Taylor is awesome. There's also a lot of redundant skill sets here, and I don't think there's the offensive upside that there is at Arkansas. So to me, knowing that, it kind of puts a cap on what Texas A&M can be, but I understand why Aggies fans believe that they can be very, very good this year, because they can be very, very good this year.
I have them 5, I think, right behind Kentucky.
Too.
So I had Kentucky at 4, then I have Texas A&M at 5. I think they're going to be pretty good. I think their issue is that, first of all, their scoring tree is a lot narrower, right? They're very backcourt heavy with the scoring. You bring in Eli Lawrence and Jace Carter, who were double-digit scorers at their previous stops, but they're probably coming off the bench on the wing. They're not as big in the front court either, which concerns me, especially with, I think there's like 5 7-footers in the SEC or something like that are projected to start at the 5. But you have maybe the best player in the SEC in Wade Taylor, or if not the best, then one of the best players in the SEC in Wade Taylor.
I would say one of the best, and also probably the most proven. Right.
So that sets, again, it's the floor play. I think we know what the floor for this Texas A&M team is, and that's top 6, top 7 in the SEC. But I agree with you. I don't know if the ceiling is quite there for me to get excited for Texas A&M this season.
Yeah,
but we picked them 5th. My guess is they finish somewhere 3rd or 4th, because I'm playing ceiling for a lot of these other teams.
Right.
And 1 or 2 of them are bound to not reach that.
I mean, Buzz Williams has done what he was hired to do there, which is to raise the level of the program. And he's done that. Like, we're talking about this team as a floor team because we know that they're going to be NCAA tournament good in pretty much any scenario, which you've rarely been able to say about any Texas A&M team. Right. This is the best team that he's had, I think. And going 15-3 in the SEC last season certainly adds to the expectations for this year. But I also think that last year they benefited from some scheduling, and we've talked about this the last couple of years, where the SEC champion has typically benefited from a schedule that involves one time playing Kentucky, one time playing Alabama, one time playing Arkansas. Like, occasionally there's always one team that has a favorable draw in that sense, just with how the SEC scheduling works and how unbalanced it can be. And they were the team that benefited from that last year. It's going to be a little bit more difficult this year. But this, I think, is his most talented team. That takes us to Tennessee. as the last of this top group. And I wanted to save Tennessee for last because if you have been a frequent or consistent listener to the show over many years, you know how both of us have felt about Tennessee and their ceiling. They are another one of these high floor teams, but the ceiling hasn't always been there because of the offensive issues. Let's just call them that they've run into that has held them against better teams that they've faced. Connor, I am higher on this Tennessee team than any Tennessee team Rick Barnes has had because I think the offense is going to be better.
I still need them to prove it.
That is fair. I think adding Dalton Connect from Northern Colorado, I think adding Justin Gainey from USC Upstate brings the shooting that they need around Vescovi. Mm-hmm. You now have 3 very reliable shooters on the perimeter. You're going to get what you get from Ziegler and Josiah Jordan-James. Those guys can certainly hit shots from down there, but they're not consistent. But you have more shooting. Both of those guys can give you 10 points a game. Connect can give you 20 at certain times. He should be a 15-point per game scorer in the SEC, I think, given his skill set, and certainly the way he looked against Michigan State in their charity exhibition. The identity of Tennessee has not changed and is not changing. This is a defense-first team that's going to win on defense. But not only landing those guys, but going after those guys and bringing them in, I think shows that Rick Barnes knows he needs to change something if they're going to get over that hump at Tennessee. And I think these are guys that can take them there. We have to see it on the court in games that matter, but I have more optimism about Tennessee being a actually elite team than I have at any point in the Rick Barnes tenure.
So I agree with you. The reason I say I still need to see it is, remember, Tennessee dropped damn near 100 on Gonzaga in their exhibition last year, and everyone was excited about the offense, and they finished in the 60s.
Well,
so
Gonzaga had some defensive issues early on last season, and I was willing to write it off as that, as they were breaking in a new backcourt. Michigan State was an experienced group.
This is also a really small Tennessee team.
Yes.
When you're talking about the size at the, I don't know who's going to start at the 5 between Awaka or Idu. Probably.
Can I argue
Awaka,
that helps because you're naturally going to be more offensively gifted, I think, with smaller players in the way that Rick Barnes wants to play.
That's fair. That's fair. My question is how much are they going to sacrifice? And I get a lot of it's system with Tennessee.
Yep.
But how much are you sacrificing defensively by having a Dalton Connect who is okay defensively, but I don't think he's going to be a huge plus defender in the SEC.
Yep.
How much do they have a 6'9", 6'10", 6'11" guy on the floor versus at the 5 versus a 6'8", 6'7" guy on the floor at the 5? The backcourt defensively is going to be the backcourt defensively. Josiah Jordan-James is excellent, but there's some holes I think that they didn't have last year.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because last year Plavsic was not good.
No, he played UFC instead of basketball.
Right, but that gave pause to offensive guys from actually attacking the basket at times, I think, because you knew
that's fair.
You were going to get clobbered to the ground if you drove. I don't know. I'm just going to need to see it because it's kind of the same story as Virginia, right? There have been years where we've been expecting some sort of offensive resurgence and it hasn't come. And until it does come, I'm going to be lower. Granted, I have them 3rd in the SEC, so it's not like I'm super low on them. I just don't know if they're the top 10, top 15 team that I've been seeing people have them as, just because of those questions. Dalton Connect is great offensively in a 1-game sample size at that level in an exhibition against Michigan State. But is he going to be, an 18 point per game scorer in the SEC, or is he going to be 12?
Right.
So
A lot will depend on that. I will save the rest of my Tennessee opinions for later on in the show. But that's your top tier, and then I think you get into a handful of interesting teams behind them. I'll just run through the list: Auburn, Florida, Mississippi State, Missouri, and Ole Miss. I think are all teams that can make the NCAA tournament and probably have some expectations, maybe less on the Ole Miss side of things with Chris Beard now being there. But these are 5 that are intriguing for different reasons. You have Missouri hoping to build on last season's momentum and continue that. You have Auburn, who's kind of taken a step back the last couple of years, trying to get back to being at the forefront of the conference title race. Florida is still looking for a breakout. The second year under Golding. Mississippi State was okay year 1 under Chris Jans, right under 500 in the SEC. Kind of limited again with the ceiling, but has a floor they play to. Ole Miss going to have a totally new look with Chris Beard. We'll start with Auburn because they've been in that top group more recently. I love Janai Broom. I think he's great. I have questions everywhere else.
I don't have questions at the 2 guard. I think you know exactly what you're going to get out of Katie Johnson. No, I would probably put Auburn in the middle, maybe towards the back end of that group, at least in terms of what I think the average
I would say
outcome would be.
I would say with Katie Johnson, you know that you're not going to know what you're going to get from him.
That's fair. That's fair. You're going to get a lot of shot attempts from him.
Yes. But yeah, like for me, there are question marks pretty much everywhere else, and that starts with some transfers starting in the backcourt and perhaps a freshman, Aiden Holloway.
Yeah, I mean, what is the Almanac has it? Aiden Holloway, Katie Johnson, Denver Jones as the 3 guards, and then Jalen Williams and Janai Broom returning as the two in the front court. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I don't want to say they're going to be bad because we've learned not to doubt Bruce Pearl.
Right.
But this is a team that was, kind of clawed its way to 7th in the SEC last year. They made it to the second round. And as much as we hoped for more, I think over the course of his career from Flanagan and Green were huge last year for Auburn, especially down the stretch.
Yeah.
And losing both of them, I think puts Auburn into a tough spot because I don't think anyone they have coming in replaces what they provided to the Tigers.
I agree. Like Bruce Pearl team's always going to be at a certain level, but the ceiling isn't there with that group. The ceiling is with Florida.
Yes.
But the bottom also isn't there, which is not a good thing. I think the honeymoon has kind of worn off with Todd Golden, where there were high expectations last year with what he brought in the transfer portal. Finished under 500 overall, which Gator fans are not happy about. They brought him in to be a better version of Mike White and do the things Mike White couldn't do, and he did on the recruiting trail. But this is kind of a real defining year, I think, for how Golden's tenure at Florida is going to go, whether it's going to last a long time or whether Florida might be in the hunt for a coach next season. Right. More high quality transfers brought in here. There's talent, but we need to see it. I think, 'cause I think we thought we were going to see it last year and we didn't.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're set in the backcourt, and even the front court, but I think in the backcourt, you're pretty set, right? You've got Walter Clayton coming over from a winning team under one of the best coaches to ever do it, playing the point guard. Riley Kugel, I think, has a pretty big breakout year this year. Will Richard, again, he's another just an efficient scorer. Backing up Clayton, You've got Zion Pullen, who I will still say is one of the best playmakers for others.
Yep.
At the mid-major level last year. He's, he can shoot the ball at a pretty decent clip. He shot 39% last year, but I think he really makes his money attacking the rim. He can score around the rim really well. And granted, in the SEC versus the Big West, it's going to be a little bit different, but he's still going to make money attacking the rim, getting it out to shooters. They have shooters everywhere.
Yes.
Clayton, Kugel, Richard, Pullen, Jarvis, all of them shot over 37% from three last year. Julian Rishwain is another shooter. You look at his efficiency numbers, 26 from the floor, 24 from three. That doesn't look good. But when he was playing for Todd Golden at San Francisco, he was an efficient shooter. Like that was what he did. And so I think if he can come in and get into the Todd Golden system with a coach he trusts, a coach he knows, and return to even part of the way to that level and shoot like a 34%, 35% from three, like that's going to be good enough. We talked about Hamilton a while ago. I really think he's going to be okay at the center this year. Like we saw a lot from him at Marshall that we liked. And he's 7'1", pretty big center. Tyrese Samuel comes over. He played at the Big East level. Like this is a team that should be really good.
Yes.
The question is, you look at Todd Golden. He's had one good season as a head coach in his entire career as a head coach. Made it to the tournament with San Francisco. Hasn't really had another season outside of that where you look at him and go, that's a guy who can get us to where we need to be as the Florida Gators basketball program. If you're another, like I'm sure, South Carolina, not to pile on, South Carolina would be happy to have a guy like Golden, but Florida and South Carolina are two different athletic departments with two different expectations for their basketball program.
Yes. Like Golden, I think it's fair to say he has never overachieved with his roster that he's had. That San Francisco team that made the tournament had the talent, I think, to make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're one of the 68 best teams in the country that year. And Golden can get you to perform at expectations, and he's done that. What he needs to do at Florida by going to the transfer portal and assembling a team of mid-major all-stars, essentially, is to get them to play above expectations and above their collective talent level. Because I don't know if there's like a star
expectation. Yeah, right. Even at expectations, though, because you look at what happened last year, right? You were expecting big things from Kyle Lofton. You were expecting a breakout from Alex Fudge. Neither of those things happened. And then you're looking at 16-17, 9-9, and an NIT berth.
Right.
And a loss in the first round of the NIT. So they didn't even win when they got there. I think I trust the combination of Clayton and Pullen more than I trust the combination of trust Lofton at the one.
That's fair.
Clayton, again, has played for a winner. Zion Pullen, again, is never even, he scored 18 points per game for UC Riverside. Never tried to do too much at Riverside. Like you watched them play, and you watched, AJ Mitchell had the pieces around him where he never had to feel like he did that, but you watched other guys at the Big West level, try to take over games, and Pullen would do that and could do that, but he was also just as good at finding open guys and getting the assists when needed. Like he knew how to play within himself. And that's, I think, something that maybe Lofton pushed a little bit too much. But this is a team, again, like you said, like Golden needs to get the most out of his guys. He is an analytics guru, which only goes so far. Like you need to be an analytics guru who can also be a player coach. And we just haven't seen that at Florida yet.
The other team I want to make sure that we touch on and spend some time on is Missouri. Huge success in Dennis Gates' first season. They had the season the Florida fans thought they were getting with Todd Golden. Missouri fans got it with Gates. He also went to the transfer portal. Like they have a starting lineup that is going to be, I think, pretty much all transfers, like guys who did not start their careers at Missouri, and they're all going to be grad students or super seniors. This is an experienced team. Should be a pretty deep team as well, but you have to replace some key guys that made last season so special, namely Kobe Brown and Demoy Hodge. I think Missouri will be good again. I think I trust Gates going back to what he did at Cleveland State to be somebody who can have his team play at expectations or above expectations consistently. So I think they get to the tournament. Beyond that, I don't know. I think you see what you get out of John Tonji, transferring over from Colorado State, Vanover from Oral Roberts. If you get anything from Caleb Grill from Iowa State. But good team. Don't know if they are going to be enough to crack that top tier in the SEC.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really there are three guys on this roster that I'm looking at as your season is only going to be as good as they can make it, which is Nick Honor.
Yep.
I think he has the most minutes returning on this team. Wasn't a huge scorer, but could shoot the hell out of the ball. He's going to be asked probably to play the point guard, have the ball in his hands a little bit more. You mentioned John Tonji. I think he might be the player that you look at as, if it's not Nick Honor, who's the number one option. And I think it might be Tonji. Just the way he's been efficient from both spots on the floor. Like, who else would it be?
That's what gives me pause. Is because the coaches of Colorado State, where Tonji was before, were incredibly high on him and his ability. And I think they still are. But he wasn't able to put it together consistently. You would see flashes, right, and then he'd be invisible. And then you'd see flashes again, and then you'd see some okay play, and then he'd be invisible. Like, if he plays at his best consistently, he can be that guy in the SEC. We just haven't seen it really for 2 games in a row at any point in his college career. So it's not that it's not in there. We just need to see it consistently. And if that happens, then maybe they can crack in that top tier. But until then, I'm keeping them in this mid tier of, call them NCAA tournament hopefuls or bubble teams.
Yeah. And then Connor Vanover. Which Vanover is going to show up? And I think Vanover has been good at pretty much everywhere he's gone. He lost favor on that Arkansas team, I think primarily because he wasn't quite athletic enough to do what Musselman needed him to do, but he's always been efficient around the rim. He can pop out for threes at an okay clip for a 7'5" guy. He is 7'5". We saw what he could do for Oral Roberts last year, had over 3 blocks per game. Like, that's, if he can be a 8.7 6-7 rebound, 1.5 to 2 block, 58 from the field type of guy, 58 from 2, I should say, type of guy, because he's going to take some threes, which are going to knock his shooting percentage down. That at least provides you a little bit of comfort for a team where the next tallest guy on the roster that's probably going to get minutes is like a 6'7" Caleb Brown.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Vanover needs to be the Vanover of Oral Roberts, the Vanover of Powell, the Vanover of first year at Arkansas for this Missouri. I don't know if Missouri makes the NCAA tournament, but I think they're going to be a thorn in the side of some teams in the SEC this year.
Yes. Anybody else you want to make sure that we cover or touch on before we go to bold predictions? And I'm not just skipping over this section because I don't want to talk about how bad South Carolina is going to be. But the rest of these teams in this league, I don't think there's much upside to Vanderbilt, Georgia, South Carolina, or LSU this year. Like, to me, that's a clear bottom tier.
Maybe get your thoughts, because I kind of that second tier of teams that we were talking about after Texas A&M.
Yep.
You know, I'm pretty high on Florida, but like, I kind of like this Mississippi State team. They're experienced, like, maybe not efficient scoring the ball, I think, is the biggest issue.
Like,
but
that's the part for me.
Men.
Where's the shooting? Where is the shooting? Like, we talked about Texas A&M being a poor man's Arkansas. To me, Mississippi State's a poor man's A&M. right? Like just the way they play and the level they play it at with the talent they have, particularly with Tolu Smith being hurt for the first part of the year, like they're automatically the third best team in the league at doing what you do.
Right. I don't know. I think because this is a team that, remember, snuck in but made the NCAA tournament last year.
Did.
I don't necessarily think that they get particularly worse. They don't really lose anybody.
They don't.
Tolu Smith is probably a first team all SEC guy. Like, this is a team that I'll probably have 6th or 7th in the SEC heading into the season.
Smith's injury plays a big role, I think, for them, because like he is the guy who can take them to that next level when he's healthy. They bring a lot of guys back, but I don't know where a lot of those guys have to go left in their development. Like, they kind of are who they are. I think a repeat of last year would be about on par or good for this team, but not having Tolu Smith for half a season, I think could be problematic.
Yeah, I would just say that you're not going to play SEC teams in the first half of the season.
Yes, that's fair.
So, like, this is another team where I think they're going to struggle, obviously, for the first 2 months, but then come SEC play, like, they're going to be a top 8, top 7 type of team if Tolu Smith can come back fully healthy.
Yes. Yeah.
And you just kind of have to tread water until then, which means that you're going to have to see what you get out of Keyshawn Murphy at the 5. And he didn't play many minutes last year, but he was like, didn't have the worst efficiency I've seen from a freshman. So
yes. Well, let's go ahead and dive into bold predictions now.
Okay.
I have potentially a spicy one. We'll see. But the floor is yours if you would like to go first with your bold predictions.
You go first. SEC. You go first. I'm still formulating.
Tennessee not only wins the league regular season title alone, they don't share it, they win it. They also earn a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Wow.
I think Tennessee, with their improved offense, will end up being a top 5 team in the country by the end of the season.
Yeah, I was going to go the other way.
I believe in the offense.
We do not have an SEC team in the top 15 by the end of the season. I think they're all in that probably 13 to 25 range, like all 5 of them. They're going to beat up on each other. No one's going to separate, and you're going to see a lot. One of them might sneak in as a 3 or a 4 seed in the tournament just because of their record against, quad 1 and stuff. But I don't know. I just don't see the ceiling for, I talk about how I like the Alabama backcourt, but their front court scares me. Like, I talk about how I like Arkansas, but we don't know if they're going to put it together. Kentucky has a bunch of freshmen. Like, this is a conference with so many question marks at every single spot in those standings. And there's not really a team I trust to do it.
Except for Tennessee, because they're going to be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. They won't make the Final Four. I don't think that, but they will be 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. That'll do it for this episode of the Heat Check Hangout. Thank you all very much for listening or watching. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, leave a 5-star review, do all those things that all the podcasts tell you to do, because it does help. We very much appreciate it. We're right at the start of the season, Connor. It's about that time, and I love it. My co-host, Connor Hope. I'm Brian Ralph. Thank you all very much for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.
Basketball, college. Basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa, basketball, college. Come on. Basketball, college. Basketball, college. Whoa, basketball, college.